Hey besties, thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome if you're new here, welcome back if you are not. Either way, I'm so excited to have you. As you will have seen, today's video we're doing my September wrap up, and let me tell you, September has been my best reading month ever in terms of the amount of books I read, because this month we read 10 books. Can I get a round of applause please? Because 10 books whilst working full-time feels like such a big achievement. I'm very, very happy. So it may be a slightly longer wrap up than normal. Grab a hot beverage, I have a coffee. This is still very hot, and let's get into the stats portion of this video to begin with, because I am loving a stat when it comes to my reading at the moment and a breakdown. As I said, I read 10 books this month. 6 of those were fantasies. We can tell the colder seasons have well and truly begun by that number alone. I read 3 romances, 1 dark academia. In terms of the formats, how I read these books, so I consumed 1 book via audiobook, 1 book was a library book. I went back to my library era. 3 books on Kindle, although I also have the physical copy of one of those books. And then 6 I read physical, either paperback or hardback. But let's dive straight into things with the actual books that I read. Okay, so I did read quite a few series this month. I do have a video coming that is finishing fantasy series, so stay tuned for that. But because of that, I'm going to do the breakdown, like the wrap up, a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about the books that I read as series kind of collectively together, just because I think kind of second, third book in a series, like you can't ever go too much into detail in a wrap up, so I feel like pairing them together works quite well. So the first book, and then actually the last book that I read this month, was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and then Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherland. So these firstly have the most beautiful covers I think I have ever seen of any book ever. They are stunning and they are a really fun time. So the Emily Wilde series is a light academia fantasy series, so we follow Emily, Miss Emily Wilde, who is a scholar at Cambridge studying dridology, I think they call it. I might be wrong, which is basically the study of like fairies and fae and mythical creatures, which is really fun. So we are kind of in like a real world setting. I don't know when book 1 takes place. I don't think book 1 has like the year in it. Oh, it does. I just completely missed that. So book 1 takes place in 1909 and then book 2 takes place in 1910. So we're kind of in like a little bit of an oldie worldy setting. We don't have full modern technology, so it's almost a little bit of a historical fiction blended with that fantasy, which is a subgenre that I personally really enjoy. I really enjoyed how it was done in Babel when I read that last autumn. There's something that just kind of, I don't know, like it just sweeps you in a little bit more. But yeah, so we are following Emily Wilde. In book 1, she goes on a journey to Legisland, which is kind of Scandinavia. I can't remember specifically where, because it is just kind of referred to as Legisland throughout the book. And she is going there to finish off the Encyclopedia of Fairies. So this is going to be the first piece of academia that has been like this extensive on fairies like ever. Like this is a really groundbreaking piece of like literature in the dridology community. So that is kind of the setup of book 1, and the pacing of book 1 I will say is a little bit slower. So these are kind of dubbed as cozy fantasies, obviously with that like light academia setting. I will say that this one is a lot more heavy on like the cozy vibes. Not too much happens until more towards the end, and I did find this one very hard to get into to begin with. It was a book that I was really looking forward to, and I'd heard a lot of people say it reads like a textbook, and I do kind of get that. It is very wordy, and obviously it's a book, like it should be wordy. Like I understand that being like, you're probably watching this like, Charlotte, it's a book, like it's going to be wordy, but it's wordy in just the language. Obviously it's set in 1909, it's kind of written like that as well. It's written like it's written by an academic. Like, it does create the character really well in that sense, but she's also a bit of a quirky gal. Like, we can tell that she struggles quite a lot with like the human interactions that she has within the book. So when you kind of take that into account as well, like her use of language, like it is a little bit trickier, it is a little bit wordier, and to begin with I found that really difficult, especially compiled with the fact that like not a lot is happening. Kind of the first part of the book is like, I went looking for some common fae today, but eventually it does pick up, and the plot, it gets a plot basically, and then a really nice romance kind of subplot comes into it, which is quite minimal in book one, but still like it's nice to kind of have something going on, I think, at that point in the book, because it was getting a little bit too like but it is really cute, and I really do like the interactions with like the common fae that happen in this book. It's really cute, very wholesome. This series as a whole is kind of giving me like grown-up Spiderwick Chronicles, purely because, like, do you know in Spiderwick Chronicles, like, I haven't watched it in a really long time, so what I remember is what this book has brought to my memory is when they're like going into the forest and they're like talking to like the brownies and things. I don't know if they're called brownies in Spiderwick, but those kind of like fae and fairies. I think they are like trolls in Spiderwick actually. Anyway, they're talking to the mythical creatures, like, and you have that very like real world meets these magical creatures. Like, that is very much what these books give, but also like everyone is believing of the creatures in this book. Like, it is, obviously they work at Cambridge, like it's very, very respected that this is something they are studying, and it's very normal, and like the village even is like expectant of the fact that there's scholars there, so that definitely adds a layer. But in terms of my rating, I did give book one a 3.5 stars. So not a super high rating, and if you watch the video that this is in, which all of these books that have videos, I'll pop the thumbnail, and like if I can figure it out, because I never can on YouTube, a link to the video, or I will say like down below links as well. But in the video that I read this, I did rate this a 4 stars. I decided to bring that down after reading book 2. I just didn't feel like it was there. The plot wasn't plotting enough for me, and I feel like because it was a book that I was excited to read, I was kind of trying to make myself like it a little bit more than I actually did. But that leads us on nicely to book 2. So it did take me a little bit of a while to read this. Obviously this month it did come out in paperback, so it was kind of a nice time to be picking these books up. I enjoyed this so much more. This, it's still very much like the cozy vibes. Like, I don't want you to think that we're getting rid of cozy vibes, because it still very much is cozy, but I will say that the plot does pick up kind of considerably in this. There is a lot more going on. We are actively working towards some of the things that happen at the end of book 2, like we're working towards finding solutions for those things. So naturally, like, we do just have a lot more of a plot, which I really enjoyed. I found this much quicker of a read, and I don't know if it's because I was a lot more used to the writing style, or if the writing style is slightly different, because I did kind of find that I was speeding through this. Like, I read this in 3 days. I managed to read like literally the last half in one sitting. Well, across one day, pretty much most of it in one sitting, which I definitely struggled with, like when I read like 100 pages of this in one sitting, or like on one day. So it's definitely like very different. And I will say, if you didn't like the first book because you found like just the lack of plot a little bit difficult, then I think you would really like this one, because just a lot more happened, and we're kind of seeing what they're always working towards. And actually, like, the map of the Otherlands and like the scholarly work doesn't form as much of the basis as for what the characters are doing. They're more working towards like this other thing, which I can't say because it is a spoiler. But I did end up giving this one a 4 stars for that reason. I just really enjoyed that we were clearly like working towards something, and we were taking part in more of a plot. Okay, so going into the second book that I read this month, I picked up Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This was a super fun read. I love an Elsie Silver book. I feel like you can't go wrong with them. This is a small town romance with I think he's a horse trainer, but something to do with horses, and she's a country singer, but like not full country vibes. Like she's not giving Nashville, like she's very much like living in LA before she comes to where she's here. So it's like very kind of different, but it's small town romance, kind of single dad, because this whole series is single dad. We have our horse trainer and we have our country music star, who we see, if you've read the first book in the series, we start to see things about Skylar, who is our FMC in book 1. Like she's being spoke about, she's being discussed in book 1. So we kind of have like a bit of an introduction to her, like not as a character per se, but like she's set up in the world, in the universe. Like we are aware that she has a lot of stuff going on. Like she's in the public eye, she's in the press, and maybe not like getting too much good press and publicity, which really sets this book up. So Skylar comes to Rose Hill to record at the studios that are set up in book 1 by our 2 characters in that book. So that's what brings Skylar there, and she ends up basically meeting West on her way to the studios into town, and they kind of have like a bit of initial attraction. But obviously like West knows who she is, and he's like, well obviously like, she's not gonna be interested in me, like she's a celebrity, and he's trying to play it cool. And then obviously she gets to the studio and they don't really have anywhere to put her, so she ends up basically having to stay in West bunkhouse, which is where Rosie stayed in book 1, which is super cute. And we definitely see some of the things from that. Like it's really nice. Like we're on that same setting, and the majority of the book takes place kind of like on the farm, like between the 2 houses. Like I don't know if you'd count them as ranches, but like on that piece of land, which is really, really nice. This book does go into like depth with some aspects of celebrity, which I find are really, really interesting, and I do really like in books. And as a whole, I did really enjoy a lot of this book. The only thing that I didn't love is there was a lot of spice, and I don't feel like the spice made me believe in the couple. Like there was a lot of spice in places where I would have preferred date scenes. A lot of the spice scenes end up being in like the present tense, and then at the start of the chapter it would talk in past tense about like some of the things that they've done. That's kind of, you can tell as a reader that that's what's kind of built their relationship, but like it's not, you don't get to read that, you don't get to experience that with them, which I found kind of makes the romance a little bit less believable. But I did really enjoy this, and I do think I preferred this to book 1. I really liked the connection these characters had, and I really liked the kind of special moments. I did originally give this 4.5 stars, but I do think I'm gonna lower it to 4 stars because I've just not really thought about it too much since finishing it, apart from when I've seen people talking about it online. So I'm gonna lower this to a 4-star read for now, because I just don't think it's worthy of the 4.5 place range. But that was the third book of the month. Okay, so then we have the last 2 books in a series. We have Foxglove and Wisteria by Adeline Grace. So Foxglove I read as part of a 24-hour readathon, which again I will link. I read this in pretty much a day. I read like the first chapter, like the first 20 pages the night before, and then I read the rest of it during the readathon. So I did read most of this in a day, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed this book. It carries on with a lot. It carries on exactly where Belladonna leaves off. So we jump kind of straight into another mystery, which is really exciting and kept me super gripped. Something I really like in the first and second book is with the mysteries, like I have never known what is going to happen and when it's going to happen. Like I found everything completely shocking and really, really enjoyed that. I loved the gothic feel to this book. I loved the scenes that we got at Foxglove and some of the interactions with like spirits and ghosts. So this series is about a character called Signa and Death. Death is like a physical being, like he is the Reaper, and Signa basically, like she can't die and she can actually see spirits and ghosts, which is really exciting, and we definitely see a lot of that in this book, and Signa like kind of becoming super comfortable with the fact that like that is who she is and that is what she can do, which I loved. I thought it was really fun. I don't think I've ever read a book with anything like that in, which was just really enjoyable and really cool, and I love the interactions with those kind of like ghosts and things. I found this like quite a quick paced book because there's like, it's split into like different sections which were like, that were very clear cut, like with different sceneries and different environments, and I really enjoyed that, and I just enjoyed this book a lot more than book one. So I did end up giving this a 4.5 star rating. As I said, really enjoyed it, enjoyed being back with the world, really enjoyed the like how atmospheric this book is. It's so atmospheric, like the world it creates is just incredible. Very much enjoyed. However, we cannot say too much of the same for Wisteria. I was a little bit let down by this book after how much I ended up loving Foxglove. This just didn't do it for me. We do follow a different character in this book, and I didn't love the changing of like the pattern, I suppose you'd say, like in characters. I would have much more preferred if we'd have just kept with following Signa's story. Like that would have been a lot more interesting to me. I didn't love the two characters that we followed in this, and like overall to me this felt a lot more like a spin-off than anything else. I can't really talk about what it was about because it would just be like huge spoilers for like the first two books. I can't even really talk about like who it's about because it's a huge spoiler for the first two books, which is obviously frustrating. But yeah, there were some aspects that I liked about it. It really develops this kind of world. Like in Belladonna we kind of see that we have Death, and he's kind of pictured as being like the only like mythical being, and then we expand upon that in Foxglove. So well, we expand upon that in Foxglove, and then it's further expanded upon in Wisteria, which is kind of nice because you learn about the world as the characters learn about the world. But overall this just didn't really do it for me. I found it really hard to get through. The pacing was really off. Nothing really happened, in my opinion, until we were over halfway through, and then it just fell a little bit flat for me. So I did give this a 3.5 star rating, which I'm not gonna lie guys, like I quite rarely like rate books that kind of lowly. So yeah, this was not the best for me. Like I also gave the first Emily Wilde 3.5 stars, but I would say I preferred that to this. But I wouldn't give this lower than 3.5 stars because I did still read it, and I did read like a big chunk in one go, and I feel like to read a big chunk in one go, like I have to have some kind of enjoyment behind it, like beyond just like the fact that I was filming a video and I wanted to make sure that I didn't DNF it. So yeah, 3.5 stars for this one. Okay, so sticking with our chronological order and talking about another series, we have the Shepherd King duology. I read these two books on my Kindle, as they are recent additions to Kindle Unlimited, which is so exciting because let me tell you, I had been wanting to read these books for a while, so I was very excited when they got put on Kindle Unlimited. The world in these books is so unique to anything that I have ever read before and anything I've ever seen anything about. So this is a world that has a magic system that operates in two different ways. Firstly, we have a mist that causes people to get infected with magic, and that magic is forbidden. If you get found to have that magic, if you get found to have the infection, you and anyone that was like harboring you, like if they didn't hand you in straight away, like that's the end. Like you're dead, you're being thrown out of the kingdom. So pretty crazy. And then the other magic system is these cards called Providence cards, which each card carries a different power, and you tap it 3 times and you can use the power basically. So there's 12 different kinds, and it's kind of like the Partridge in a Pear Tree song, where there's only one Twin Orders card, but there's 2, I can't remember what ones there's 2 of, and then there's 3 of something else, 4 of like that kind of it works up like that and the cards are like displayed like that. So really, really unique magic system, very interesting magic system. And of course it's a fantasy with an infection in it. Of course our main character has said infection, and of course our MMC is the person that has to kill people with the infection. Would it be a fantasy series if that was not the trope? But it was so good. Like the twists and turns this book takes is just absolutely incredible. And I don't think there was like, maybe because I've not read too many fantasies, like especially these kind of fantasies, like I wasn't expecting so much of it, and maybe to other people it'd be like, well yeah, no, that was a given, like why, that of course that would happen. But to me so much of it was unexpected, and that just made it so enjoyable. I found it quite slow to begin with, I'm not gonna lie. When the world was being set up, I found it really difficult, and it is simply, I think, because it is such a complex magic system compared to like any other fantasy that I have read recently. Even like Belladonna series, like actually by the end, like by Wisteria, that is quite a complex world, but like it takes so long for us to build up to that world that by the time we're there it doesn't feel that complex, so makes it a little bit tricky. But anyway, such a complex magic system that to begin with I was really struggling. This was part of the 24-hour readathon. I read this on the Saturday and I was like falling asleep whilst reading it, like I was struggling, and then I picked up on the Sunday to finish it and I could not put it down, and I haven't had the feeling of not being able to put a book down in so long. It was the best feeling ever. And I did have the same thing with book 2 as well. It took me a really long time to get into it because we have some things that change, because the end of book 1, book 1 only has Elspeth, our main character's POV, whereas book 2 we have like 3 different POVs, and one of them is first person and the others is third person. Let me tell you, I don't know about you guys, but I don't mind if a book is first person or third person. It does not typically bother me, but when we're swapping between the two, it takes my brain a minute, especially because the Elspeth chapters were quite confusing to begin with. So all of the chapters were a little bit confusing to begin with. It was quite hard to figure out where we were picking up from, which I struggled with. But that being said, book 1 I did give 4.5 stars. And book 2, oh my goodness, I loved this book so much. By the time I got kind of just before halfway, I was just starting to absolutely adore this book. I was thinking about it constantly. All I wanted to do was read it, and I did end up giving it 5 stars. The romance in book 2 is incredible, like actually my favourite thing ever. One of my favourite romances. It was done so perfectly. Everything about it was done so perfectly. I honestly just adored it. I hate that it's a duology because I want to spend more time with those characters, but it was also like just so nice reading a duology that wasn't hugely long. I think like book 1 is just over 300 pages, book 2 is like 400 pages, so to read like 2 books that are that kind of length, like it was just really nice. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like sometimes we just need some short fantasies, and yeah, they were honestly so good. If you have not read them, please read them. I would say book 2 especially is every single thing I want in a fantasy series and more. We had like a battle scene, we had this kind of like castle, we had some characters that were still in a castle, and we had like the magic that came with that, and then we had some characters that were on a quest. Like it just hit so hard. It ticked every box I have for a fantasy, and I don't know how I'm gonna carry on reading fantasies that aren't that one, because it was just so perfect. But following on from that, obviously, as I said, this is still in the 24-hour readathon. I needed an audiobook because my brain, after finishing that fantasy series, was like she was shutting down. So I picked up the audio of Hex and the City. This was a really fun book, very fun audiobook. I'd really recommend the audiobook for this actually. I feel like it was really well done. I'm not a huge audiobook listener, so when I do listen to an audiobook and I do engage, like it's pretty good. Like it has to be good for me to keep attention the whole way. And actually I was really glad with this one that I did read it in audio format. because the chapters were so long. I'm talking 35-minute long chapters. Like, it was a little bit crazy, but it was pretty cool. So it's about Poppy. I think it's about Poppy and Alex, but I don't know if I'm thinking Poppy and Alex because I'm thinking people we meet on vacation. Okay, so it's about Poppy, who is a witch. She has like this long crazy hair, which is magical. Like, her hair has powers, like that's kind of part of like her witchiness. And she lives with Iris, who is an elder witch, because Poppy didn't know that she was a witch until she was much older. And she works in a, you know, like those magic shops where like it's not a real magic shop, it's like a tourist trap in Covent Garden. She works in one of those, and that is basically how she ends up meeting Alex, who is our MMC, and he is like a stage magician. So like, he doesn't have magic, like he's not magical, but like he does do magic, if that makes sense. Like, that's kind of like his job, like he's an actor basically. Yeah, so they are introduced because Alex comes into the shop and buys a pendant that Poppy thinks she has cursed. So the first half of the book, we then follow like them on a journey with this necklace, and I thought that was going to be the whole plot. I was like, wow, I'm getting through this book really quickly. Like, I swear Libby said it was going to be like 11 hours. No, there's so many plots in this book. It actually is insane. It takes so many twists and turns. I don't know if it felt like there were more twists and turns and more happened because I was listening to it like in one sitting. Like, I started it in the afternoon, I paused it a few times for like speaking to family and things, but otherwise like it was done in one block. So I don't know if because of that it made it feel like more was happening, but it was crazy and it was really strange as well. Like, so it's dual POV, but like the way the POV is done, it's not like each chapter is a different character's POV. It was like you just get like a line break, and then they would start, it would be like Poppy thinks this, because it was third person, and then all of a sudden it'd be like Alex thinks this, and sometimes it'd be about the same interaction, and I did find that quite confusing. Although I will always say, like, when reading books in 24-hour readathons, you do like, your brain, she slows down, she stops working a little bit. So it's always kind of hard to judge like the quality, I think, of a book in a 24-hour readathon, just because like you're taking so much information in. Like, that does play a big part. I did enjoy it. I didn't like the romance part, to be honest. I didn't feel like it needed it. I feel like we could have done everything that happened without there needing to be this huge romance. Like, that just didn't really work for me. It didn't scratch it. So this was another 3.5 star, and I am now realizing, I said about Wisteria, I don't rate books 3.5 stars. I've rated quite a few books this month 3.5 stars. It just didn't hit for me. It was enjoyable. I definitely think I will pick up, I think Hex Appeal is like, it's not the same series, but it's like another book in the same kind of world. I definitely think I'll give that a go, potentially like before Halloween, like if I'm needing something else for my TBR. It's on Kindle Unlimited. The audiobook's on Libby. Like, it was a fun spooky season read. It definitely got me feeling autumnal, and yeah, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good. I think I would have preferred it as just like a witch fiction as opposed to a romance book. Okay, we have 2 more books to talk about. The first of which is Nora Goes Off Script. So I started this at the very end of my 24-hour readathon, and I didn't finish it with you guys in that video, so this is my first time properly talking about it. Nora Goes Off Script is about Nora, who basically turns the story of her husband leaving her into the script of a movie, and she sells it. So normally she writes like kind of cheesy Hallmark movies for like the romance channel, but she ended up writing the story of her kind of divorce, her separation, and turning that into a movie, and it became like a huge blockbuster movie. And they did end up filming some of it on site. Like, they filmed it at her house, obviously where the breakdown of the marriage happened. So we have our male main character who, whilst he is there, Nora ends up developing kind of a relationship with him. It's very strange, it happens very quickly, it's very unexpected. I didn't massively believe the romance part, I'm not gonna lie, but I really like this book as a women's fiction because we then follow Nora on this journey, and it really did remind me of a Dolly Alderton book. It was very similar to Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. If you've read that and enjoyed that, I think you'll really enjoy Nora Goes Off Script, because they are very similar in places and it's really, really interesting. My camera died. I'm hoping, I've never filmed whilst it's on charge before. I didn't know I could do that, so hopefully this works okay, because we've got like a book and a half to talk about. Anyway, as we were talking about with Nora Goes Off Script, oh my god, what was I saying about it? Anyway, I think I was talking about how fans of Ghosts by Dolly Alderton would like it just because of the kind of story we take. I would definitely say that it is much more of like a women's fiction. It kind of reminds me maybe more of like a mature Emily Henry. Like, this is definitely the kind of book that I can see Emily Henry writing in kind of like the next 10 to 15 years. Obviously, if she is still writing romances, like definitely the kind of book I could see her writing, and I did really enjoy it. I really wasn't sure what to expect from it. I got to points where I was like, I'm not even sure if this is going to be classed as a romance book, because it didn't really follow the typical romance archetype. If you don't like miscommunication, you won't enjoy this, but I actually think the miscommunication in this is so valid, and like I don't really feel too angry at like either sides for the miscommunication that happened, because like it was a sticky one. If you've read the book, let me know, maybe vaguely, what you thought of the miscommunication, because I am curious to see what other people thought, because it didn't bother me. I think it made sense. Like, I can't say it because it's such a big spoiler, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book and I did give it 4 stars. I did debate about giving it 5 stars for a while, but ultimately, like, and I think if it was a women's fiction and it didn't kind of then swing back to the romance, I do think I would have given it closer to a 5 star, but because the romance ended up being like what it was, I didn't believe in the couple enough. Like, it didn't make sense to me, especially like how they started. Like, I just, the couple wasn't like a 5-star couple for me. And I feel like I never really rate a romance book 5 stars. The only romance books that I've given 5 stars, I'm pretty sure, is Happy Place and Magnolia Parks, if you count that. I personally do not count Magnolia Parks as romance, but so yeah, I did give it 4 stars. It is really hard for me to give a romance book kind of 5 stars. Like, I don't think there's really any romance book that I've rated 5 stars, so yeah. And then that brings us to, finally, this is a really long video, I've chatted a lot, but these are my favourite videos to film, I'm not gonna lie. I love having a natter. I'd love to do a full spoiler one of these, but I feel like it might be quite rare to find someone that's read all of the same book, so I don't know, maybe I need to do like a little spoiler section at the end. I think her name's Katie Whitrook. She did that with her Throne of Glass and also with her Powerless and Reckless Reads like vlog. And I really like that. It's something that I'm very much considering doing in my own videos, especially when I was filming my Finishing Fantasy series. I really considered doing it in that, because it's quite difficult when you're reading series to not kind of then talk about spoilers, because like I want to chat. Like, the reason I make book videos is because there's not a huge amount of people in my own life that read a lot, so that's one of the main reasons I make book videos, so I can yap away about books without annoying people in real life. But I can't remember where that was even going. Talking about doing full spoilers. So yeah, let me know if you guys would want anything with spoilers in, because I'm intrigued. The final book, If We Were Villains. I loved this and I wasn't actually expecting to love it as much as I did. I was scared going into this. Again, I did a whole video just on this one book. This was in my bookshelf scavenger hunt video. I will link it or put it on the screen. We'll figure it out in the editing process. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This is about Oliver, and we find out at the start that he has just been serving 10 years in prison for a crime he may or may not have committed. We don't really know what that crime is at the beginning. Well, we know it's a murder from the back, but we don't know who, we don't know what happened, and we are piecing the pieces together, and it's really fun. I really enjoyed it. Like, I really liked not knowing who was killed until halfway through the book, because so the way this is structured like a Shakespeare play. We have 5 acts, and each act starts with a prologue, and the prologue is Oliver talking to the police officer that was originally investigating the case, because he's like, what actually happened? Like, he never believed that Oliver did it. Obviously, like, he for the things that we find out as the book goes on, he does go with it. Like, Oliver does get prosecuted. Obviously, we know he's just spent 10 years in jail, but the police officer was like, now that you're out, like, please tell me. I'm not working in the police anymore, I'm doing private work, like, please just tell me, like, I promise I won't do anything with the information, I just need to know, which is so valid and absolutely would be me. So that we have those kind of sections, and then when we are in the acts and the scenes, we are kind of in the past, we're in the tense that like everything happened in. So this is about a group of students at Delta University in their 4th year, and each year people get cut. So there's only like 7 of them left, I think. So they're a very, very tight-knit group, and they're very interesting. They talk in Shakespearean all the time, like they are a little bit, they're oddballs, perhaps. And super, super interesting, and it's just like, I don't know, there were so many points in this book, like before we found out who was murdered, where I was like, maybe it's this person, maybe it's this person, like I couldn't put my finger on who it could be, and I love that. I don't think I've ever read a book like that where like you've not known who has been murdered. Like, it was so interesting, and I loved the mystery behind it. I really liked how all of the acting and the Shakespeare plots and everything tied in. It was super, like, just unique. Like, I've not really read anything like it. I know The Secret History is meant to be quite similar, but like I've not read that yet. I do think after reading this I definitely do want to read Secret History, but yeah, I absolutely loved this. It was so good. The ending, when I tell you I had to Google, I had to go into Reddit and look at what people were saying about the ending, that is when you know a book hits. I'm sorry. That is like one of the best feelings in the world, is going into a Reddit thread to find people talking about the ending of a book. Chef's kiss. So yeah, as you may be guessing, this was a 5-star read. So we did have 2 5 stars this month, which feels like a win because it has been a while since I've had a 5-star read. Before this month, oh, I had a 5-star read with a 7-year slip. So maybe it's not been that long, but I haven't had that many 5 stars this year. I've been averaging like 1 a month, which is quite rare for me, but I think the more books you read, the more kind of strict you become. But yeah, I adored this. I loved Oliver as a narrator. I couldn't tell if he was like just an unreliable narrator or what was going on, and I really enjoyed that. I haven't read a book like this in a super long time, and it was just so good. Would definitely recommend to anyone. Obviously it's a 5-star read, like of course that's a book that I'm recommending. But that was the last book that we read this month. So obviously we don't have too many physical copies this month, only 6, but it's gonna collapse. But that does round out this video. So these are all the physical ones. Obviously we have our others that we do not have the physical copies of right now. But yeah, if you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them, and I will catch you in the next one, I suppose. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, please like, subscribe and give this video a thumbs up so I know that you like seeing these videos, because I love filming them. But otherwise I will catch you in the next one. Bye!